What's up everyone, welcome back to ARTV. My name is John and it is time for a review of album number 4, Origins by the alternative band Imagine Dragons. Well, would you look at that spiffy shirt that I'm sporting today? Thank you to officialbandshirts.com for sending me a few shirts, a couple of extra goodies like these keychains that you see here. If you want to go get some officially licensed merch for yourself in the world of rock and alternative, then check out the site linked down below and use code ARTV for 25% off. Imagine Dragons have always been a complicated band for me, and that was no different leading into Evolve, their record that dropped just last year in 2017. That album got a little bit worse and more tedious with time. It's an album that I feel is very frustrating because it does present some solid enough ideas, but the band just pulls themselves in every single direction. And unfortunately, while this album is a step up from Evolve, it is not a new origin story for Imagine Dragons as the title might imply. Instead, it's more of the same, and it proves that Imagine Dragon are yes men in the sense that they say yes to any collaboration, any movie or soundtrack opportunity they get, or just any sound that they might try to pull off, as reasoned by songs like West Coast on this album that go for a little bit more of a country pop vibe, and then you've got something like Natural, which is in line with like past hits like Believer because it's trying to be that anthem that's crying out, and it's not a bad song. It's just that them being the yes men that they are, sometimes you're going to get it wrong in terms of just pulling yourself all over the place, and on this record, once again, they get it wrong a lot of the time. The strategy of Imagine Dragons and their label, of course, is to present them as a rock band, an alternative group. And alternative, I suppose I can grant them. Rock, I cannot. It works though, because the band believe it, and as a result, their followers believe it. They are the biggest quote-unquote rock band of the streaming era. And a part of me wants to celebrate that and cheer it on just because, oh, there's a band scoring a hit. But the other part of my brain that's a little bit more rational says, you know, this is just meandering like pop rock gibberish that could be squirted out by anyone, right? Don't expect Imagine Dragons to start turning over new leaves on this album because it's just not happening. In a way, they are very consistent and dedicated to their poppier, watered down version of pop rock that they pull off, and they are to this generation what Nickelback was to the early 2000s. Ooh, I know that was a harsh one, didn't mean to pull that out of my back pocket, but here, we've unleashed that, so let's just keep going on. The splicing together of acoustic guitars, occasional electrics, some drum machines, even some rattling hi-hats, a trap beat on something like Stuck. This album just takes every opportunity that it can to swerve into a different lane because they've got like danceable stuff like Only and even something like Cool Out, which is one of the better tracks, and they just continuously change those lanes and they throw you around. And it's not so much that it's as abrupt as their last record, but this time it just feels frustrating because once again, there is potential, and in some of these songs I do sense the emotion, like Bad Liar, for example. Dan Reynolds, the lead singer of Imagine Dragons, was going through a divorce, and apparently he has reconciled with his now ex-wife and they're dating again, but the pain from that track definitely is felt in a way, but the instrumental just kind of drowns it out in a way because it feels mediocre at best. The positives here? Well, I suppose the songwriting has stepped up a couple of notches. I think the record does feel a bit more coherent in some ways, although, like I said, don't get your expectations up just hoping for something that flows quite well. In a way it does, but I also just see way too many ideas and directions being attempted, and not enough of those attempts being executed. When Reynolds is unleashing vocally, I truly feel the impact and the charisma that his voice naturally has, and I like the fact that he hits these more intense registers, but he doesn't do that often enough, and that's why I feel like maybe Natural was a bad prelude in terms of first single, and also being the opening cut, because the energy is never again felt in that regard. There's definitely some more low-key moments, and even something like Zero that was made for the Ralph Breaks the Internet soundtrack. It just feels so flat. And I get this feeling while I'm listening to not only Zero, but a lot of this record. It's like driving through the desert playing I Spy, but you keep looking for new things to spot, and there's just like nothing, so you're just cruising and you're there and you're at the Imagine Dragons altitude. Hey, let's start off on a positive note here. I do like the lead single Natural, despite it being overplayed already. That doesn't change the fact that this is a very solid song that's easy to sing along with, and it doesn't feel as cheap as many of their other singles, so I saw it as an improvement. Cool Out is a nice, almost kind of funky jam that works in synthesizers and other tones that I just appreciate on a track that feels like a distancing of and maybe like a breakup style song. It's a great moment on this LP that actually had me nodding my head, dancing along, and thinking I can groove to this. Bullet in a Gun definitely makes some questionable choices in terms of the production. Thanks a lot, Mattman and Robin, for being inconsistent on the production once again. But on this track in particular, I really felt like Reynolds was trying to make a statement that really landed, and he's talking about how fame can ruin people and how he himself felt this impact and this pressure that was rising as he got more famous. There are so many voices shouting at you, and he kind of contemplates on this one why so many people have chosen to take their own life, at least in the world of music. It's an impactful moment, and despite a few things that I definitely would have changed with the whole bullet in a gun thing, it's not a bad song. Then, however, we have to deal with the total mediocrity of some of these moments that roll through like a bale of hay that you would just never even think about ever again. You look at it and you're like, that's the most plain thing I've ever seen in my life. And it's like, oh, no, just kidding. That was West Coast. That was Stuck. And Stuck, I would definitely say, would be like on the bad side of the hay. Is that even a saying, the bad side of the hay? I don't think it is. Needle in the haystack. That's the phrase I was looking for. Prepare Yourself for Digital, which is kind of like an anthem for the protester. And while I agree that there are a lot of things worthy of protesting, this just comes across as like a bland attempt at being like a Twitter warrior. Also, it doesn't help that the song feels about as fresh as an expired loaf of bread, but we'll leave it there. Calling back to Zero from the Ralph Breaks the Internet soundtrack, yet another soundtrack appearance from Imagine Dragons. Someone give me a count in the comment section, please. This song here just feels like Dan Reynolds just totally smoothing and glossing over everything. Like I mentioned with Natural, I like when his voice unleashes, and it felt like the instrumental on Zero was calling for that. But instead, we just get a nice instrumental. Don't get me wrong, I kind of like that you can actually hear some crisp bass there and some actual guitars floating and lingering there, but the actual vocal presence is just so subpar. He just sounds bored here. Bad Liar does a pretty good job of opening up about his relationship though, and I do find favor with this song. I like the electronic production there, it actually works out, and Only is something that feels pretty damn catchy, even if it does sound kind of gimmicky, like almost another Kygo collaboration that's appearing on the standard edition, except it's not at all that. It has kind of a drop that shifts into it, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't at least kind of groove to it, kind of get my moves on, even though I don't have any moves. The closing moment on the standard edition, Love, feels very important at this place in time in our country, in our world, and for that reason, even though it is a bit gimmicky, I feel like it's an important song to put out there, and Imagine Dragons do portray that good, clean image for the most part, I feel like. So if people are looking up to a song like this, even though it might not personally be my favorite thing, I understand a cut like this a lot more than I do some of the other generic ones like Machine or Zero or West Coast or Digital. This one actually feels like it has a little bit more on its palette. Even though Dan Reynolds and Imagine Dragons might not think that they make music for commercials and movies, rest assured that they continue doing that on the majority of their new album, Origins. It is not as bad as the last record, which I downgraded my rating of to a 1.5, but still, there are a lot of missing pieces, a lot of things that just have me shrugging my shoulders and thinking, why would I come back to this? Why this and not anything else? This is something that I could appreciate a good handful of tracks on, but overall, I don't think it's necessarily worth your time. For me, I'm going with a 2.5 out of 5. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Keep in mind that this was all just my take and opinion on things, so be sure to let me know what you think tastefully, respectfully down below. Drop a like on the review while you're here, and subscribe to the channel if you're new in town. Hey, you know what would be great? Supporting the channel on Patreon at the top link down below, or else the annotation in the corner. If you would like to see the last Imagine Dragons review I did, then tap here, or tap here for my Muse review. Other than that, my social media accounts can be found linked in the description, and I'll see you soon for more on ARTV.